What is mental health? Key concepts in mental health. Mental health is defined as a state or condition on which an individual feels a sense of well-being. This gives him or her the capacity to live life in fulfillment of what he or she wants to achieve in accordance to the available resources. This condition also provides an individual the capacity to be resilient to the stresses he meets, and to respond to these challenges without having to compromise his well-being. This also makes him productive and fruitful for himself and his community. Mental wellness could also be defined as the lack of mental problems or disorders. People who do not present diagnosable behaviors that could qualify as a mental disorder are seen as mentally healthy. For example, someone who has an obsession on things may not necessarily have a mental disorder, like obsession. Thus he is said to have mental wellness. But when this obsession is combined with unrelenting compulsion to do the object of obsession, the person may already be diagnosed with a mental disorder called obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. It could also be seen as a positive element in an individual's personality, which makes it possible to enhance mental wellness regardless of a diagnosable mental disorder. This definition covers a person's capacity to live life to the fullest, to respond well to his environment through the conscious or unconscious use of coping mechanisms, and to be able to balance emotional as well as psychological well-being in relation to constant flow of experiences. Mental health across culture. The World Health Organization believes that there is no single definition for mental health, due to differences in culture. What could be mentally healthy, or acceptable behavior, in one culture may present something too eccentric in another. For example, cannibalistic behavior in some tribes living in remote areas is highly regarded as a religious practice. However, in the majority of urbanized world this could be seen as barbaric or insane. Disruption in mental health. Abnormalities in mental health could lead to a number of problems, with various representations. Some people with mental illnesses have aggressive behaviors while others are withdrawn and lack social interest. Each type of disorder has its own signs and symptoms, therefore, diagnosis as well as treatment vary depending on the nature of the mental health problem. There are several factors that disrupt mental health including environment or upbringing, biological makeup of a person, pre-programmed instructions in the genes, medical disorders, traumatic experiences such as loss and abuse, and substance abuse. While one factor could be dominant than the other, all of these are contributors to the development of the majority of mental health disorders. In some cases, a single factor may be sufficient to trigger the disorder, but the majority of disorders require an accumulation of experience that constantly challenge the well-being of a person. What preserves mental health? The preservation of mental health is highly dependent on the capacity of the person to a. blend in his environment and handle its stresses, b. achieve a good internal balance in his personality that is sufficient to give a stable character, and c. create a good perspective that would limit the damages of negative experiences. For some people, a good support system such as a sympathetic family, or a strong social group may work well to safeguard mental health. Mental health, not just the absence of mental disorders. Most people think that mental health only applies to those people who have diagnosable mental disorders. The truth is all of us should be concerned about our mental health. It is our basis of being healthy. It is the holistic approach to health. In fact, many people adhere to the belief that mental health is the core of healthiness. Health starts and ends with mental health. It encompasses everything, and it is everybody's business. For virtually all people, mental health is often neglected until something apparently becomes wrong. Until then, we will have to wait for signs that it is vital to our existence, to our well-being, to our relationships with other people, to our perceptions, to our fulfillment, and even to our own happiness. Even though we have achieved great medical advancements, there still seems to be lacks in our general knowledge on mental health. We have developed quick fixes to our physical ailments, but we are left far behind with our solutions to mental illnesses. If we have anything, there still remain some loopholes, and what we know is inconclusive. We haven't developed universal treatments for psychological disorders, and even assessments and diagnosis of such ailments are flawed. In the past, the general concept for being healthy is the absence of disease. If so, then someone who doesn't have diagnosable heart attack but experience irrational fear on something like chicken or heights is a healthy person. In fact, no. While blood pressure, cholesterol level, and body temperature are easy to assess, these are still seen as singular components of our health. Disruptions in these mechanisms mean that a person could be physically ill. However, the health of a person is not only associated to how well his body functions, but also to how well are his psychological, emotional, and social dispositions. Manifestations of mental illness are much harder to assist, since most symptoms occur discretely during the developmental stages of the disorders, and internal states are dependent on the subjective nature of the disorder. For example, someone who usually feels blue may or may not be diagnosed with depression. We also have to take into account the social aspect of mental health. People who have sickness have more obvious manifestations that they are ill, therefore the society and immediate environment could easily identify whether or not a person is sick. For mental health, however, ignorance could lead to wrong perceptions. For example, a teenager who became drug dependent, and later committed suicide, is viewed as irresponsible and desperate, when in fact he may be suffering from a psychological disorder. A simplistic definition to mental health could be successful mental functioning. But what are the parameters of this definition? What could possibly tell us that someone is struggling through mental illness? A. Someone who is distressed for a prolonged period without apparent, logical reason. B. Someone who has disruptions in thinking. C. Someone who has altered behaviors and moods. D. Someone who relies on substances such as drugs, alcohol and cigarettes, may have issues on their mental health. E. Someone who has impaired social functions. These are just representations of how a person with mental health may behave. However, these are not conclusive bases. As we may yet to understand, mental health is directly correlated with physical ailment, or health. Both may be one and the same but are very different in nature.